Dear friends, before we begin, take the old sailor's advice. Get comfortable. Wrap that blanket, warm your hands on the cup, and step with me, just here, through the swinging door of a Nassau tavern where the floor is sticky as sap and the air is thick enough to slice. Lanterns bead the smoke with gold, fiddles scrape something fast, a parrot on a rafter heckles every chorus. You smell molasses, brine, wet wool, spilled rum, and a whiff of tar from a coat that never quite dried. Dice rattle, cards slap. Someone laughs like a cannon misfiring, and someone else is sobbing into his sleeve in the corner because a ship sailed without him. Between the music and the murmurs lives tonight's truth. Not plunder, not broadsides, not even storms. But what pirates did when they wanted to rise above the ache of rope in the hands, the sting of salt in every cut, the long gnaw of fear. I tell you plainly, pirates got higher than you'd ever believe. And more. Not just with drink or smoke, but with rituals, jokes, talismans, and stories so bright they could warm the bones of a winter watch. And since a good tale walks rather than jumps, we'll begin with the easiest ladder a sailor ever climbed, the one poured into a cup. Rum was the sea's second language, the early stuff they called kill devil or tafia, rough spirit born from molasses, sharp as a bosun's tongue, liable to peel paint if you asked it rude. Later came smoother rums, aged in cask, but pirates swallowed whatever the barrel offered. A dram straight could lift a soul up the shrouds, yet the wiser custom was to cut it, hot water for warmth, a shaving of sugar if luck had been kind, a scrape of nutmeg when a prize carried spice. Some swore by bumbo, rum, sugar, water, a squeeze of lime, others by flip beer and rum frothed with a red-hot iron loggerhead until it hissed like a snake. Many a mustache met its end to a careless loggerhead. Singed whiskers smell like regret. The Royal Navy's habit of watering spirits into grog Admiral Vernon, Old Grog, with his famous grogram cloak seeped into pirate life by rumor and imitation. A hot mug on a night so cold you could hear the stars shiver. Salvation. A cold mug when the sun had burned the palms of your hands. Pardon. Rum was coin, reward, anesthesia, and apology. Crews toasted hall and harbor, swore oaths, buried grief, and, in the honesty of too much, started fights over nothing and everything. A captain could lose a ship to a gale. He could also lose it to a spree. Blackstrap, a tarry mix of cheap rum and molasses, hung about some harbors like a fog bank, sweet, heavy, unforgiving. There were regional cousins too, Iraq and Batavia's alleys, palm wine along Guinea's lagoons, aguardiente from Spanish storehouses, and cachaça where Portuguese influence lingered. Anything that climbed was welcome, though the smart boatswain kept a stern eye. Drink makes brave men careless, he'd mutter, and careless men make widows. Funny, but true. The hangover cure list could fill a logbook. Hair of the dog, pickle brine, raw egg and beer, fried salt pork eaten scalding hot, or the surgeon's classic prescription, sweat it out aloft, you'll be right by noon. Morbid, but true. More than one sailor drowned in an inch of water in the scuppers, too drunk to turn his head. More than one duel began with a boast over cards and ended before dawn with a sheet for a shroud. Even so, many crews set rules in their articles. No drunkenness on watch, no open cask without the quartermaster, no brawling after the bell. Bartholomew Roberts was said to forbid gaming for money and limit drinking hours. Other captains counted lashes in place of lessons. The point wasn't piety, it was survival. A reef doesn't wait while you sleep it off. But when mugs lowered, pipes lifted, and another haze rose to meet the moon. Tobacco curled through every story of the age. Clay pipes dangled from belts like extra fingers. Some men carved bone stems to show off. Others decorated bowls with mermaids, anchors, hearts. They chewed, they puffed, and when they felt fancy, they snuffed. A pinch up the nose that sent a noble sneeze booming down the mess like a small broadside. Snuff boxes were little theaters, ivory lids, scrimshaw scenes, tiny mirrors to check if the sea had made a fool of your face. Pipes passed hand to hand after dog watch, a ritual as steady as prayer. A spark from the galley, a long draw, a sigh that said by smoke what no one wanted to say by speech. I am tired, I am afraid, I am still here. Tobacco was currency, comfort, and conversation. The smell lived in coats forever, stitched into the seams right beside salt and regret. And sometimes, the bowl held more than tobacco. Along West African coasts and on Caribbean islands, sailors met people who mixed hemp leaves with tobacco for a soft, floaty drift. Some African crewmen brought herbcraft aboard. Some islanders traded bundles with knowing smiles. Was it universal? Number. But sea lanes knot together plants as well as people. A pinch here, a pinch there, and the deck creaked a little slower, the stars leaned closer, and the day's bruises forgot to throb for an hour. Another rumor, half truth, half brag, said desperate men smoked rope. The phrase outlived the practice. Tarred rigging isn't a pleasure, nor healthy. Sailors, not fools, preferred a clean bowl. Still, the joke survived. If the tobacco runs out, try the stazel. Parrots trained to squawk pipes cold. Whenever the last ember died, a cheeky reminder to pack again. A man asleep with embers in beard or bunk made every heart stop. More than one ship burned that way, vanishing into smoke not of pleasure, but of ruin. Sensible captains banned pipes below decks and set a sand tub beside any flame. If smoke softened edges, some swore it opened doors. Whether truth or tall tale, the next step on this ladder led into stranger rooms. Sailors are collectors of stories the way the sea collects ships, none too gently and without much sorting. They heard of Taino cohoba, yopo snuff blown through bone tubes in ceremony, of peyote buttons bitter as remorse, of mushrooms that grew after rains and made colors sing. Did pirates truly sit in circles with shamans? Sometimes the tale was first-hand, sometimes it belonged to a cousin's shipmate's uncle who swore he'd seen it in a lagoon where the moon stood still. Closer to home was laudanum, the surgeon's brown bottle, opium dissolved in wine. It dulled agony when knives must work, amputations, bullets grimed out with forceps, teeth pulled when rot howled. Men drifted into a sleep so deep they sometimes didn't return. Some grew fond of the draught without wounds. The border between healing and escape blurred until no one cared. There were sleeping draughts of poppy and valerian, Jesuit's bark, quinine for fevers, pearl beer with wormwood to throw heat into cold bodies. A chest of spices, clove, ginger, cinnamon, was medicine as much as luxury. Ginger eased the stomach, clove soothed a tooth, cinnamon perfumed breath that had argued with salt pork for too many days. They whispered, too, of captains who took visions as orders. One claimed saint. Elmo himself spoke from the mast flame and promised calm seas if he threw a purse of coin overboard as tithe. Another swore the ghost of a hanged man visited him in a laudanum dream, pointing the way to a cove where silver slept. Did men believe it? Enough to follow. Sailors are suspicious creatures, but they are also desperate for meaning. One fellow swore he'd seen mermaids combing their hair on a sandbar. Turned out to be manatees fat as bishops. He begged to face Spanish cannon rather than his crew's jokes. Another heard the voices of drowned mates every night. When he jumped overboard mid-watch, no one laughed, and the sea didn't bother to explain. Some visions were the sky's work, Fata Morgana mirages stacking ships into castles, phosphorescence blazing in wakes like spilled stars, halos round the moon, ring round the moon, rain soon, and foxfire, saint. Elmo licking spars in blue tongues. If you were exhausted, hungry, and 2 mugs into your courage, the world's magic was an easy sell. But visions bloom best in soil already seeded with belief, and belief on the sea was thicker than tar. The sea had rules beyond charts. Whistling called the wind, helpful when calm, a sin and a blow. Killing an albatross invited curses. Sailing on Friday tempted fate. Many a captain waited an hour past midnight to rename the day. Bananas aboard were bad luck to some, a joke to others, a fist fight to the wrong cook on the wrong morning. Talismans sprouted like barnacles. A newborn's call, dried and sold dear, sewn into a pouch, said to keep a sailor from drowning. Gold earrings paid for funerals if a body washed ashore unknown. They also, some believed, improved sight, as if the body were rigging that could be tuned. Tattoos, swallows for safe return, anchors for steadiness, hearts pierced not to bleed but to dare. Crosses carved shallow on knuckles swore to keep blades away from veins. A coin under the mast shod the ship with fortune. A bottle of rum cracked on the booze at christening fed the water spirits and kept them kindly. There were Jonahs, the unlucky, the blamed. A red-haired man could find himself shunned if storms followed. An old rival's name muttered during a run of mishaps was enough to turn cold shoulders colder. Some boats set the Jonah ashore at the next quay, and shame slept badly ever since. Cats were courted. A black cat walking towards you meant luck. Walking away meant trouble. Sailors bribed them with dried fish to secure the omen's direction. Rats, meanwhile, were augurs. A ship whose rats abandoned her in port ought not to sail. A ship whose rats partied in the breadroom had a cook who deserved his nickname. Rights mattered. Crossing the line brought Neptune's court, foam wigs, a wooden razor, dunkings, tar daubed his mustache. The greenhorn fed salty stew and then fed rum until he remembered to laugh. A smoke circle sealed oaths, pipe to pipe around the deck, and when the bowl went cold, no tongue dared break the promise. Shipboard justice sometimes rang a small mercy bell. A captain who kept one might hear it in a gale and grant a soul shelter by the caboose fire, or hear it after a brawl and spare the cane. Superstition becomes law when repeated enough, and when the wind cut to the bone, men read the sky's writing. Mare's tail clouds for coming blows, red sky at night for a sailor's delight. A haloed moon warned of weather, so did a haloed quartermaster. The sea likes a little comedy. As the night grew late, ladders stacked upon ladders, drink, smoke, visions, rites. The tavern and the deck both turned into theaters where escape headlined. But pirates cherished one more escape, the soft rebellion of ordinary joy. Cards clacked, Lanterloo, all fours, primero, while dice skittered and fists followed. A man might win 3 months' wages in a hand and lose a tooth in the argument. Cheaters palmed queens, honest fools overbet. The wise stepped away when rum warmed words into coals. Wagers piled high, rations, boots, even hammocks. One unlucky soul lost the right to sleep indoors for a week and snored inside a coil of hawser, claiming it hugged him better than any sweetheart. Shanties, work-a-songs, rose when sails needed heaving, call and response that braided breath into rope and made back-breaking labor behave. Capstan songs spun longer, steadier, pulling anchors up with rhythm where muscle alone might break. Off-duty, ballads of sweethearts and press gangs roughed up the lantern light. A fiddler could drown despair more cleanly than a sermon. A drum on a barrel turned a deck into dance floor worth scuffing. They kept rope yarn Sunday, an afternoon stolen from the calendar for mending clothes, darning socks, delousing seams, trimming beards, and telling tales. The sea, amused, sometimes let them. The cook's pot produced mystery stew, everything that could be persuaded into surrender, while the crew named it forecastle fudge, and they asked no questions as long as it was hot. Press gangs sometimes dropped the king's shilling into a man's ale and claimed him conscripted the moment he swallowed. Clever taverns installed glass-bottomed tankards so a drinker could spot the coin. Those who didn't notice woke up at sea owned by the Navy. Some never saw home again. Pirates joked that if the king wanted them, he could learn to throw dice and ask like a proper gambler. There were jokes for everything. The surgeon, old kindness on a kind ship, cold bandage on others, named his saw mercy or charity and sharpened it like a psalm. The cook was doctor of the belly, capable of ruining water if allowed 10 minutes head start. A boatswain with a love of lash was called poet because he made verses of men's backs. A quartermaster with a generous hand was Father Christmas, though his calendar was unreliable. Seasickness got its own lore. Ginger under the tongue, lemon peel chewed slow, a tight belt to keep the stomach from climbing out, or a coin under the tongue you were supposed to hold until landfall most swallowed their savings. Someone always swore that the surest cure for mal de mer was to sit under a tree. The joke never got old. Coffee and tea crept aboard when prizes allowed. Coffee turned night watches bright as lanterns. Cacao melted into water made a sailor feel rich for a handful of sips. Spices drifted from far holds into closer mugs, clove in a tooth, pepper and vinegar to clear a skull, nutmeg shaved into bumbo for feasts. A crew with access to citrus guarded it like treasure. Limes vanished faster than rumors. Laughter wasn't decoration, it was armament. Each joke drove a wedge between fear and the heart. Each chorus tied a knot the storm couldn't pick apart. And when the night burned to embers, morning always asked if the shelter had been strong enough. Let's not paint only in warm tones, friends. Beyond the laughter lived truths with teeth. Addiction followed laudanum as faithfully as shadow. A sailor grateful for a sleep that quieted his ghosts might find he could not sleep without the bottle's whisper. Liver-sick men swore off rum at sunrise and reached for it by noon. A powder room accident turned a forbidden pipe into a crater where a galley used to be. A brawl over a slur nobody remembered started a mutiny that everybody did. There were rituals for loss, too. A burial at sea, canvas shroud stitched with a cannonball at the feet, the last stitch through the nose so the dead answered if they were not. A coin pressed to eyes not from superstition, but from decency. Let him not stare at the sun. The bosun's pipe keened, the plank tilted. The sea accepted the body the way she accepts rain. Afterwards, men smoked in a circle without speaking and passed the mug without toasting. Superstitions sometimes saved lives. No whistling on deck kept foolish noise out of a gale where orders needed space. No open flame below spared powder, and beds both. A ban on cursing the wind made men choose fewer words, a small mercy when panic multiplies syllables. Even their gallows humor had gravity. On the morning of a hanging, the condemned asked for rum and took it without trembling. The rope's an honest wage, one said, and meant it. Another asked for a pipe. The captain let him smoke, and then broke the stem rather than see it passed on, a small, sharp kindness. The world is made of such details. If this feels heavy, take breath. These darker corners don't end the story, they deepen it. A man who has shaken hands with shadows laughs more honestly under lamplight. A crew who has walked through a winter together sings louder when summer finds them. And so we turn, as the earth turns, toward dawn. Picture the hour just before sunrise. The tavern's shutters hang crooked, bottles glint like dead eyes. A fiddler sleeps in his chair, bow still in hand. A parrot mutters curse words he learned too well. Outside, the tide gnaws the shore. Somewhere, a rooster remembers his job, late as always. A gull laughs like a thief who got away. On deck, the first pot bubbles in the galley, a smell like forgiveness. Hammocks sway as bodies stir, rubbing temples, spitting bitterness, comparing bruises nobody remembers earning. A cat licks salt from its paw like it owns the ship. The quartermaster squints at the sky and decides the day will be tolerable. Someone hums a shanty tale and lets it vanish before the wind can claim it as whistling. Last night's ladders aren't gone. They're folded and stowed. Rum didn't change the wind, but it made an hour bearable. Smoke didn't calm the waves, but it eased the spine where fear had roosted. Visions, whether brewed or born of exhaustion, gave names to the shapeless and turned panic into story. Superstition tied invisible lines between ship and sky so no one felt alone in the middle of everything. Jokes mapped the border between terror and courage, and songs built a bridge the whole crew could cross together. Yes, pirates got higher than you'd ever believe, higher on kill devil and grog, higher on tobacco curled in lantern light and the occasional herb that made the stars lean down, higher on laudanum when pain made prayer too long, higher on rites that turned chaos into ceremony, higher on games and laughter that elected joy captain for an evening. They climbed on smaller rungs, too. Coffee at the change of watch, cacao on a feast day, ginger under the tongue when the world tilted wickedly. They stole heat from pepper, courage from chorus, time from cards, tenderness from a cat asleep on a coil. And more than all of that, they rose on the simplest device the sea ever saw, each other. A hand at your elbow on an icy ratline, a bowl of soup pressed into your fingers, a pipe offered first when your eyes had been red all day, a bell rung for mercy when none was owed, articles read aloud by lantern light that promised fairness in place of fear, a quartermaster who looked the other way when two enemies traded a nod instead of a knife, a captain who, in the bad hour, said, "Stand close instead of stand aside." Perhaps the truest treasure they ever stole was not gold, which sinks, nor silver, which tarnishes, but hours, rescued from misery, spent under a small roof of fellowship no squall could tear away. Hours in which the world was briefly kind, or at least negotiable. Hours where the sea could be what she occasionally is, a mirror big enough to hold your better self. So, dear friends, as our lantern gutters, listen once more. A last chord from a tired fiddle, the soft slap of water, a laugh that refuses to die, the clink of a pipe bowl on oak. Smell the rum ghosting from the floorboards, the smoke stitched into coats, the salt that keeps its own accounts. Remember that rebellion was not only in plunder, but in the stubborn act of joy. For in a life designed to grind them down, pirates learn to rise by cup, by curl of smoke, by superstition, by laughter, higher than the sea could ever reach. And when the sun lifts its dull coin edge over the world, they square the yards, loose the sheets, and let the wind do what it does best, carry them, not only across water, but away for a little while from every weight a human heart was never meant to bear.